fortunately. Cool. All right. Again, welcome everyone. This is Tuesday, March 31st, and we're going to continue talking chapter 5. So we touched a little on this yesterday, folks, but I'm just going to recap it all very briefly, and I'm going to go in chronological order today. So it might be helpful if you try to make a little bit of a timeline. I'm not going to talk about every single act, but I'm going to talk about the ones that I think are the most important. And I'm going to go chronologically from 1763 to 1765. That's my goal for today. So 1763, we know the year is significant because it's the end of the 7 Years' War. The French Indian War, guys, is that, again, that imperial conflict between France and Great Britain. Indians are allied with both sides. Great Britain's ultimately going to be victorious. And we know that it's going to result in debt for Great Britain and the end of salutary neglect. Great Britain's going to pass that debt along to the colonists in the form of different taxes. First example of the end of salutary neglect will be that proclamation line. Remember 1763, that proclamation line after Pontiac's Rebellion. It's too expensive to settle out there, colonists. We're no longer going to let you have any say over where you, or I should say, we're not going to let your local governments, have say whether or not you move out east. The British Crown is going to dictate that policy. May seem minor to you, I'm not sure, but again, it's an example of the grip that Great Britain has on the colonies tightening and salutary neglect ending. Pretty quickly, guys, 64, you get the Stamp Act, you get the Quartering Act, and all that is really quick. You know what the Stamp Act is. It's a basic tax on most paper goods, and most colonists find it, pretty offensive. They're going to protest that in several ways. Some of those ways will be peaceful, like boycotting. Some of them will be violent and, using intimidation tactics, like the tarring and feathering of tax collectors. Please remember the Stamp Act Congress. That is, again, about colonial unity. It's delegates from all these different colonies getting together and essentially formally petitioning the king. Again, it's not like the most exciting thing in the world, but again, it's about new American colonial identity forming. So the Stamp Act Congress is an important piece of vocabulary to know, please. Let me see, 64 still, obviously the Quartering Act, guys. It's in our Bill of Rights, so we don't have to quarter soldiers anymore. I'm just trying to help you understand why the colonists are going to start resenting British authority, at an increasing level. Having to quarter British soldiers is going to make you resent the British Crown a little bit. So just please be aware that tension's starting to build. These are not Americans yet, folks. We are still loyal British subjects. And many of these loyal British subjects simply are going to want to return to salutary neglect while these oppressive taxes and oppressive violations of their rights are coming out. I'm going to screen share with you too and pull up my learning targets, just in case a few of you don't have them. All right. Give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen now. Excellent. All right, guys. So again, we already talked about proclamation line, Quartering Act, awesome. The concept of virtual representation, guys, would be something you might utilize in an essay. That would be Great Britain's response to the colonist demands. The colonists say, hey, in Parliament, there are no people from Massachusetts in there. There are no New Yorkers. There are no Pennsylvanians in Parliament. Remember, Great Britain would say, you are still represented virtually. All British subjects are represented in Parliament. We don't have representatives from all sectors of England. Yet those people living in England are still represented in Parliament. Just because there's not someone from your home state doesn't mean you're not represented. You're all Englishmen. So again, that's that concept that Great Britain would throw back at them. Colonists would say no taxation without representation. Great Britain would respond by saying you have virtual representation. You are Englishmen and you are represented as Englishmen under Parliament, even if you don't have representatives from your respective colonies there. Townsend Act, guys, remember Stamp Act will get repealed. After the protest, after the boycotts, after the formal appeals of the Stamp Act Congress, that will get repealed. It'll be replaced by a little bit harsher one, and that's a Townsend Act. I want you to think more of that as a sales tax on more items. And remember, Americans aren't used to paying that type of tax. You might pay property tax, but that's really it. You're typically not paying taxes on a lot of goods unless you're like a big importer, exporter, or a merchant. It's not like you go to the store down the street and buy a small amount of flour and you're paying a tax on it. That's not how it used to work back in the day. Townsend Act, again, I don't even have the list of all the items it is. You could probably Wikipedia and find it. There's a whole list of items that the Townsend Act is a tax on. But again, it represents, a shift. People are saying, what the heck? All of a sudden, everyday items that I used to never pay a tax on are taxed. And I certainly don't remember authorizing this tax. I don't remember my Massachusetts government authorizing this tax. Again, this is where the idea of no taxation without representation is going to take hold. Obviously, the Tea Act is going to be very important. And again, it's about mercantilism, folks. Great Britain, if you could remember Great Britain, in the East India Company, making sure that colonists are funneling as much money into that state-sponsored company as they possibly can, forcing you to buy British tea, forcing you to buy the East India's Tea Company and pay a tax on it. That will, of course, lead us to what we know, the Boston Tea Party. I don't really have a great video clip of that. I'm sure there's got to be a cool documentary with a great clip of the Boston Tea Party. It's not really in the John Adams one so I don't have a good clip for that one. But remember what that is, guys. That's the Sons of Liberty, and it's an act of protest. And they're not just, I don't call it peaceful, but I'm not going to call it violent either. It's an act of vandalism. They destroy something like $900,000 of modern day's money worth of tea. We could look up the exact amount of damage, and please don't quote me on this exact amount of tea that they destroy in the harbor, but it's significant, guys. It's enough tea, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, to make the government quite upset. And not only do you have to understand the Boston Tea Party and what it is, you've got to understand Great Britain's response, because Great Britain's response is arguably more important than the Tea Party itself. How does Great Britain respond? Anyone want to shout out how Great Britain responds to the Tea Party? I would love it.
Don't they close I'm thinking they closed or something.
They closed the Boston Harbor.
Right?
Yeah. I heard like 3 or 4 of you say it. They closed Boston Harbor. And remember, guys, what kind of economy does Boston have? They've got a maritime-based port economy. I shouldn't say everyone, but most people's job in Boston totally relies on ships coming in and out of the harbor. Rope makers, barrel makers, all of the businesses and hotels and restaurants along the waterfront, warehouses, longshoremen. Those are people that unload ships and load them. Boston's economy is crippled when essentially the harbor is closed. And not only do they close the harbor, and again, that's called the Intolerable Acts or the Coercive Acts. Not only do they close the harbor and cripple the colonists economically, they also suspend the local colonial assembly. So they are crippling Massachusetts economically, and they are suspending their colonial assembly. Guys, that's huge. This is going to be another episode, and I'm trying to set a pattern. Remember, we talked about the Stamp Act Congress being colonial identity. Another huge thing that's going to cause new colonial identity and cause colonies, say like South Carolina, to start caring about this is the closing of Boston Harbor. Most of the revolutionary crap that's going on, guys, is in New England. There's not a ton of revolutionary agitation in the southern and middle colonies in the early, 1770s and late 1760s. This is really going on in Massachusetts. Go ahead, speak up.
I thought it was just Massachusetts, not New England as a whole.
You know what, Annabelle, that's probably even more accurate. I know that it's going to spread to places like Connecticut and it will be more prevalent in New England. But if we look back at a lot of these Stamp Acts, like the Stamp Act is going to apply to everyone. Some of the Townsend Acts are going to apply to everyone. But most of the agitation and most of is certainly going to be in Massachusetts itself. I think what you said is accurate for sure. It's going to be an epicenter in Massachusetts and then radiate out from there. So I think that's accurate for sure. Let me see here. Just finishing up the coercive acts, guys, or the intolerable acts. One thing I want to highlight, and you can read about it in your textbook, but again, it's not just understanding that it closes Boston Harbor, it suspends the Massachusetts Assembly. It's about that action causing other colonists and other colonies outside of New England to start to take notice and say, this is ridiculous. We can't really allow Great Britain to step on the rights of our sister colonies, because if Massachusetts' rights aren't safe, how can the rights of Virginians be safe? And this will, again, cause huge amounts of aid to be sent into New England, guys. There's sources that you can look up on the internet where, South Carolinians and churches are all throughout the colonies and I say South Carolinians, just a random example, guys. Colonists all throughout the North America are sending aid. They're sending food. They're sending supplies to Massachusetts because they are totally blockaded. It's a very real situation. And it's going to cause, again, a new colonial identity start forming, and it will cause the revolutionary idea to spread, ideas about Great Britain's oppressive nature, and it's really going to cause more Americans or more colonists to feel that salutary neglect has very much come to an end. So it's not only knowing what the Tea Party is, it's understanding the coercive acts and understanding the connection to a new colonial identity. I'm trying to simplify it, so hopefully that's making sense. I think that's all I wanted to say on that one. We already know sons and daughters of liberty. Sons are going to sometimes use intimidation. Sometimes the sons are going to be violent. Other times they're not. The Daughters of Liberty, I'm not aware of them being violent. I'm aware of them organizing boycotts, and I'm aware of them, participating in the homespun movement. And also non-importation. That's a form of boycott. Good specific vocabulary term. We're going to refuse to import British goods. We already talked about the coercive acts, so you know what those are. And right now, guys, we're in let me look up the date exactly. The coercive acts is 1774. Someone please shout out Declaration of Independence year. Hopefully you know it.
1776.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Hope. Thanks, Grace. I appreciate you guys.
1776.
Yeah. Anyone who uses their textbook, guys, go ahead and open it up real quick if you want to 171. You can see that they've got all the major acts, a really, really nice graph and list right there. So you don't have to, but I'm just trying to point you to where that is in your textbook. I know not a lot of you use it, actually.
Lachlan, is that the Declaration of Independence?
It is.
Oh, look at Lachlan.
How did you get that?
He stole it. Haven't you ever seen National Treasure with Nicolas Cage?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Lachlan does kind of look like Nicolas Cage.
I love that. That's so funny. I like how they got those, gift shoppy documents. Nice. Anyhow, guys, the acts are right on 171. You see that we've covered about 10 years already. From 64, we got the Stamp Act, all the way up to 74 when we've got the coercive acts. So again, you don't have to necessarily remember all of them, but I hope you can at least remember the ones that I've got on the vocabulary list right here. Your textbook, again, wants you to know, guys, that not everyone is a patriot. Most people just simply want to preserve their property, their standing, and essentially, their family safety. For that reason, many people are going to be on the side of Great Britain. How could you want to revolt against the strongest, monarchy on earth? Great Britain is an incredibly powerful empire in the 1770s. It takes a lot of guts to violently rise up against them. And so for that reason, guys, a lot of people will remain loyalists. Our textbook will tell us, guys, that about 30% of American colonists will be patriots, about 30% will be loyalists, and 30% neutral. Obviously, that's not quite 100%. So, guys, those numbers can never be fully accurately nailed down. But they just want you to understand that the colonists are highly divided in the North American colonies. That's part of the reason why the Sons of Liberty have to intimidate people sometimes. If you're not following along with the boycott, they might come to your shop, like I said yesterday, and rough you up and make sure that you are falling in line with what the boycott is all about. So 1770s, guys, this leads us up into some more political action that demonstrates colonial identity. I'm trying to help you understand that if you're given an essay or a short answer on the American Revolution, you will get the analysis points if you can help the grader understand that that a new American identity is forming. At the end of the 7 Years' War, there really is not a strong American identity at all. But by 1775, we're going to have a pretty cohesive, strong American identity. Not everyone's bought and sold on it. We're going to have a lot of loyalists still. But again, enough Americans will buy into this cohesive idea of American identity to tip the scales to declare independence. So this brings us, guys, to the political action, our first Continental Congress. This is what we saw in the John Adams clip. This is where they send King George the olive branch petition. This is where he brands them traitors and says, I'm going to crush this rebellion. Guys, you're never going to be tested on the olive branch petition or anything like that. I was just trying to help you understand the chronological, progression of that. We are slowly forming the identity through the oppressive tax. Then we're finally going to meet in a unified body, but we're not really settled on what we're going to do in that unified body. If you go back and watch the John Adams clips, you'll see that a lot of, Amos left the meeting. I guess I wasn't holding his interests. Bye, Amos. You'll see in that John Adams clip, guys, that the Massachusetts and New England delegation, they're ready to break away in 1774. But most of the other colonies, guys, they're not ready. Even though they're meeting at the Continental Congress, there's not a consensus about what to do. Still in 1774, guys, the consensus is return to salutary neglect. That's why they send the king the olive branch petition. They are asking essentially to mediate this unhappy disputes, as they say in the video clip. If you want to get good at this topic, I really recommend you pull up those clips on YouTube. Or if you have Amazon, John Adams is streaming on Amazon. They're right there. So understanding the Continental Congress, guys, is another form of peaceful protest while simultaneously showing a new American identity developing. After the king rejects the olive branch petition and brands them traitors, We are going to have eventually a Second Continental Congress in 1775, guys. But something's changed in between First and Second Continental Congress. And also, I should say something has changed. I thought I was on a roll and I was flowing so well. Some things are going to change in between First and Second Continental Congress, guys. Understand that blood will be shed. We'll have our first battle of Lexington and Concord. That's when Great Britain tries to disarm the militia. I'm not saying that's where the Second Amendment comes from, but I think the argument can at least be made that it's totally relevant to that. Great Britain is trying to seize the militia's stockpile of weapons at those two cities. Those are cities just outside of Boston, guys, Lexington and Concord. And that is where the militia is based out of. And again, Great Britain attempts to seize their supplies. The Minutemen get called out, and they have a little shootout with the British. I don't even know what the casualties are. I believe I read 25 American casualties and something. I don't remember. I can't remember even the British casualties. And so please don't quote me on them. They're not that important. But understand, guys, that this is an example of blood being shed. This conflict is now escalating. This happens before Second Continental Congress. If this doesn't happen, if you don't already have violence at Lexington and Concord, I don't know if you have the Declaration of Independence at the Second Continental Congress. The other thing that's happened, folks, that's really important is Thomas Paine's book, Common Sense, has been published. It's very easy to understand. It's very widely published, and he's going to simply explain Enlightenment ideas and everyday phrases that Americans understand in the context of the struggle with Great Britain. He's going to take an Enlightenment idea and explain to simple people how the Stamp Act is a representation of this Enlightenment idea. He'll take an idea about separation of powers and use it to explain how Great Britain's violating our rights. He will use ideas of John Locke about overthrowing government to justify breaking away. So he very simply will take Enlightenment ideas and convey to colonists in North America why breaking away is justified. This book is so influential, folks. And again, it doesn't make everyone a patriot, but it makes enough Americans patriots to tip the scales and finally declare independence. A lot of people, guys, for some reason, get the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution confused. Please don't. Remember, the Declaration of Independence, guys, there's nothing about our government in the Declaration. It's just a formal breaking away of Great Britain. There's nothing about how voting works, about our rights. There is no, Bill of Rights in the Declaration. So again, I know most of you know that, but I just have to really clarify for those of you who might be confused. The Declaration of Independence is us really taking the plunge off the cliff. This is telling King George III in Great Britain that we are essentially severing all ties with you. And if you want to come after us militarily and fight a war after it, so be it. We're ready to take that on. So know what that is, though. I think we went through most of these guys already. Making an argument for loyalists and patriots, guys, it's scary taking on the greatest, empire on earth. I don't want to lose my property. I don't want to lose my life. Cool. That's really all I wanted to share today. I don't even know how long that took today or how long. That's about 20 minutes or so. I don't need to introduce any more content today. So I'm going to open it up to questions in case anyone has anything. And again, I haven't heard yet, guys, what the test is going to be, whether it's going to be an essay or whether it's going to be 3 short answer questions. I think we're probably in line for 3 short answers, but I'll find that on April 3rd. So I'll open it up for any questions, and then I'll stop recording if we don't have any questions coming up. What do we got? Anything content related before we move on and kind of maybe BS a little bit? Thanks, Jack. See you later. No questions? Okay. Well, again, in a few minutes, guys, within maybe 5 minutes of the meeting being done, I'm going to post a practice question on Google Classroom for you. Actually, you know what? I take that back. It's going to be on AP Classroom.
Mahoney, I actually have a question.
Yes, Aaron, go ahead.
It's on the review. It's for the review guide. That's due. One of the questions it asks is, what were the reasons that we won the war, the Revolutionary War?
Sure.
What would you say were 3 good examples for that, why we were successful?
Okay, that is a good question, Aaron. And although I think that it technically is on, so even though I don't really teach that content, I will share the answer with you real quick. And I think it's really, so you should write this down. And I'm glad you asked, but I don't think if you have to worry about expending brain energy, worry about it somewhere else. But here's the answer. We win the American Revolution because of our alliance with the French, first and foremost. Without the alliance with the French, we would have absolutely lost.
Yeah.
The second reason we win the American Revolution is because of familiarity with the American landscape and the geography of the terrain. We use a lot of guerrilla tactics. Sometimes we face Great Britain standing in the field, but oftentimes we use guerrilla tactics in many of the battles. And there's lots of different examples of that, but familiarity with the terrain is often cited. And then there's a third one, ideological commitment. We were fighting for independence, and so we were much more willing to sacrifice our lives than the British were to keep sending soldiers. It's kind of the same thing with Vietnam. After a while, if you're fighting a war in a foreign country, the people get kind of sick and tired of it eventually. I would argue that Great Britain will eventually lose some of their will to keep fighting this. So again, ideological commitment, familiarity with the landscape, and the alliance with the French. That's what I would write down.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Cool. Anyone else have any review questions, guys? If you want to open that up, you're welcome, Gosh and Annabelle. If you want to open the review up and have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them in the next couple minutes. Nathan? Nothing? Oh. Okay. Well, I appreciate all you guys coming in. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording at this time. Oh, again, tomorrow I'm going to put the practice question on AP Classroom now, if you want to, totally optional. I'll also put out an announcement on Google Classroom that there's a practice question up there, but the practice question will be on AP Classroom, totally optional. And yeah, I don't know if we'll do 10 a.m. tomorrow or 11 a.m. tomorrow. I think I'll do 11 a.m. tomorrow. AP Classroom is not letting me log in. It's trying. Okay, Bethany, that might be the case. So, Bethany, I'll put it in both places. I'm going to probably steal the question from AP Classroom, but I'll put it in both places. Grace, I know you want to do 10, but I think I'm going to do 11 tomorrow. And the reason I'm going to do 11 is because I haven't really done one for 6th period yet. And so tomorrow 10 is 4th period. Yeah. Honestly, Grace, I think I'm going to do 11 o'clock tomorrow or 9 o'clock. No one has me 9.
No, we have bio at 9.
Okay, then I won't do it at 9. Definitely not 9.
Yeah,
11. Does Mr. Dick do one stream a day?
Yeah, he does it for each period.
He does it for each class.
He does?
He does the same thing every single time.
So
yeah,
am I like the teacher that's doing one stream a day and not doing it for every class period?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I missed Spanish for this, Mahoney. You know how much I love my Spanish.
So
class.
all your teachers are really giving you a link for every single class period and just sitting there live? And are they delivering content or what are they doing?
They're doing their content and separating it what to do for each class. So they'll do what they normally would for normal class period.
Uh-huh.
They're separating it into this day is 2nd period or whatever, and then this day is this period or whatever with the new schedule.
So part of me feels like I am the odd man out and I should be doing what they are, but also I don't know. I just don't know how necessary it is because I'm just going to go be reviewing the exact same vocabulary and doing the exact same thing.
Well, yeah. Well, yours is fine doing it just once because you post afterwards, whereas some teachers don't post it afterwards. So that's why they do multiple things.
Okay. Well, and unless if what I'm doing really, guys, I'm here to work with you. So if what I'm doing is not working, just please let me know. You can email me and let me know. But yeah, I don't know. I'm confused. Okay. Well, thank you for the feedback. We'll stop recording at this point. And let's see, someone else had some messages. So let's stop presenting and let's stop recording.